So this is video lecture 8. I'm just numbering all the lectures, whether they're spoken in class or something you watch. I'm just numbering them consecutively so you can keep track in your notes. That means you should have a notebook out right now and taking notes. So this is how the video lectures work. I'm going to talk and I'll try and put some images up on the screen as well. Depends a little bit. We'll see how good I am at that kind of thing. And you'll see some vocabulary words and things float across the screen that will help you remember. And they're all closed captioned so that if I'm talking too fast or as I think a thunderstorm begins and you can't hear me very well, we've got that covered. We're moving to a specific development in the 1200s called the Notre Dame School of Polyphony. The Notre Dame School. Notre Dame, the great cathedral in the center of Paris on the Ile de la Cité. I wish I could take you all on a study abroad to Paris right now. And you really should think about doing study abroad if you have not, because the first study abroad I went to Paris. I went to a concert at Notre Dame in the evening, and just one of the music students along with me wanted to go. Because it was, all this old chant stuff, and people didn't think they wanted to go hear jazz. It's perfectly fine, but we went to Notre Dame, and we sat there, Alicia and I, in tears, because it struck both of us, without exchanging any words, that we were listening to the music of the 12th century written for the actual room we were sitting in. The 12th century, it's 2018. 12th century, that's 1100s, do the math. Music over 1,000 years old, composed not just for any old place. We're used to that. We take our music wherever we go. We take it in the car, we do flash mobs in the mall. Think about music created just for this one acoustic space. That's what we were listening to. And it was apparent to me, and I thought about it ever after, that you can listen to these examples that you have in your anthology. You can listen to them in the recordings. You can sit in the classroom, as you should, and listen to the grad student play the examples, and you look in your anthology. You're listening through headphones, maybe. It's not the same as sitting in not just a big space like Legacy Hall, but the big space, the one that this was intended for. It was the most amazing. And I heard that not just the notes and the rhythms and the words, but the acoustics of the room, to me, were so clearly part of this music. And I thought, oh my gosh, we're doing this all wrong. We do all our music history listening in my day in records, on CDs, iPads, on the cloud, streaming. What we ought to be doing, if only, we should go there and hear it. If only we could, at the end of this course, go to Austria, to Salzburg, and hear Mozart at the Musikverein. How much more would that be relevant to us? So it's a little commercial at the beginning of this video to remind you that this is why we do music live. This is why we do it. We would do recordings and stuff too. It's great. Absolutely. Music can be heard by anybody, anywhere. Great. But there's also that something. It was meant for this space. So that's my framework. I'll try not to get so fanciful in my future videos, but I might. So you watched the Gothic Cathedral video of Nova, the great cathedrals, and Notre Dame de Paris is a similar space. It's full of stone and light. Amazing. We have a source from the end of the 1200s, the end of the 13th century, by a student from England who's taking music history notes, or chant notes, singing notes, he went to Paris, study abroad, I guess. Let's learn how to sing the way the masters here at Notre Dame do it. And we have these student notes. That's why we know about this stuff from Notre Dame de Paris. The student's name? No idea. History, we lost the name. Didn't didn't put his name on his notebook. Put your name on your notebook right now. Because you didn't have your name on it, I know. So we just call this student by the name Anonymous 4. Anonymous 4. Because he's the fourth source in this collection of stuff that scholars were sorting through. Anonymous 4. There's a singing group, an early music singing group called Anonymous 4, in honor of this very person. If you don't put your name on your notebook, maybe someday you will be Anonymous 12 or Anonymous 62 or something. So, I don't know. Could be. Recall, or in case I haven't mentioned it in class, I'll mention it now, from about 860 to 900, we had this collection of chant that a lot of churches were using. They'd pass it around and copy it out, called the Musica Enchiriadis. It was a source of mass movements, the Gloria, the Credo, the Kyrie, psalm responses, and antiphons. It was the source, and it was monophonic. Now we think by the 12th century, the 1100s, it's clear that from different sources that people are singing these things not always just as monophony, not all in unison, but maybe in some sort of polyphony or heterophony. We talked about this, I talked about this in class before. We talked about having a drone against which the chant could happen. We talked about the organum purum, if you will, where here's the chant, and parallel to it, below it, in exactly the same intervals, is organum, is another voice, in a fourth below it, or a fifth, or an octave. Fourths, fifths, octaves. Perfect intervals. Appropriate. Perfect because Pythagoras said they were perfect, but appropriate for a sacred space. There was also a style that I'm not sure I'll have mentioned in class, and by the way, there's a thunderstorm brewing, so I hope it doesn't get too exciting on this video, but I've got to get it done. Style called discant. Discant. Two voices, the top one of which is the chant, the other voice moving against it independently. Doesn't have to always go up or down with the chant, can go in the opposite direction, but is always governed by what is consonant, fourths, fifths, and octaves, versus what is dissonant. Is this species counterpoint? No. Sorry. It's not. We'll get to that, but not anytime soon. The lecture notes of Anonymous 4, this English student, looking back at the 13th century, at the 1200s, shows a new development, that is rhythmic intent. Now we're saying for sure, hey, they're singing this in some sort of rhythmic pattern. It's not a rhythmic pattern of variety like our modern rhythms. Instead, this rhythmic pattern stuff is based on poetic patterns. The idea of a stressed or long syllable followed by an unstressed or short syllable. I am Sam. Sam, I am. Strong, weak, strong. Strong, weak, strong, or long, short, long, long, short, long. I could change the pattern around. What if I do short, long? That Sam I am, that Sam I am. I do not like that Sam I am. Weak, strong, weak, strong, weak, strong, weak, strong. Those are just two of the poetic patterns. If you were to take, say, my humanities course, one of my humanities courses, you would learn more about that, or perhaps you've done so in a poetry course. That would be a cool thing. But those are the ones we're going to deal with right now. What if I let the strongs be more dominant and the weaks be more weak? Watch this. I am Sam. Sam, I am. That Sam, I am. That Sam, I am. What have I just done? To us, it sounds like I just went into 6/8. 1, lay 2, 1, lay 2. Lay 1, lay 2, lay 1. Yeah. To us, that's what we think. That's how this notation and this performance practice seems to appear. We think this is how it sounded. So Anonymous 4 not only talks about this rhythmic innovation, he's looking actually back 100 years. He's looking at 1200 or 1150 and saying, hey, here are the great styles of organum here, polyphony at Notre Dame. Somebody's lecturing him, probably. The first composer he mentions is the great master Leonin, who flourished around the 1150s. We don't even know when he was born. We don't know anything except his name and some music that he wrote. We know nothing else about him. Thank heaven for Anonymous 4 taking good notes. Take good notes. All of history may be depending on your exact notes. Leonin writes a duplum on different chants. We're going to look at the chant called Viderunt omnes. They all saw. That's the beginning of the meaning. Viderunt, they saw. Omnes, all of them. Okay? This chant is actually on page 75 in your book. I'm going to try and put it up here. We'll see if I make it. I might not be able to. There's 3 pictures in your book, and we're going to look at the first one on the left. That is the chant. Viderunt omnes. That's the beginning of the chant. It doesn't have a rhythm. It's just free. That's how chant is. I just sang it. It's fine. There's nothing to tell me to sing this note this much longer or shorter. Leonin takes this first note, V, and he starts writing a duplum against it. And you can see this in your anthology on 1-18. And what you'll see is this da, 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 da. You see this sort of persistent pattern in the duplum voice. Wow. To us, it sounds a little choppy. And it's a little odd because there's never anything else. It's just this rhythm. There's no variety. The harmony sounds weird to us, I think, because also vertical intervals, the 4th is consonant in this. To you and me, we've been trained that the 4th is dissonant. And even if you didn't really pay attention to that in theory class, your ears have been conditioned to it. If I say, oh, there's a 4-3 suspension, if you hear it, you say, yes, dissonance going to consonants. In this time period, the 4th is consonant, and the 3rd is dissonant. What? But, oh, come on. 3rds sound great. 3rds are beautiful. Nope. Give us another 200 years. The English are the ones that are going to introduce the consonant 3rd. So to us, as we listen to this, the way we approach dissonance, stepwise, and leave it, stepwise, sounds a bit misplaced, like I thought that was dissonant, because we're conditioned to hearing different intervals dissonant. It's not, people say music is a universal language. Yes, but the specifics of things like consonant and dissonance are all cultural conditioning. So we're that far back in time that we have a different set of consonants and dissonance. Okay. So Leonin, duplum, based on this same chant that I just sang the beginning of. A generation later, around 1200, another Notre Dame master of organum, guy named Perotin, writes not only duplums, 2 parts, but 3 and even 4 parts, a quadruplum. And that's what we're going to listen to now, or you will in your notes, listen to the quadruplum on Viderunt omnes. It's got the same Notre Dame style rhythm. In this case, a lot of long, short, long, short, long. There's an example on page 77, and the full example is in your anthology 1-19. We've now got a carefully crafted 4-part texture. It's less likely that this 4-part texture would have been improvised. That's where Howard Goodall's Big Bang about notation, that's where he's correct. It's easier to compose ahead of time multiple different parts. And yet, I have to say, there's evidence, strong evidence, that says people were still improvising these things. And were able to do so, would have been able to do so at a cultural center like Notre Dame de Paris. In fact, I have a student, CSU alum, graduated in Horn, went to Indiana University and got his master's in early music. I think it was a year ago. He told me he went to a workshop on improvising organum. And it can be done. If it could be done now, it could have been done 1,300 years ago. So let's look at this Perotin style organum, and see what is different from 50 years before. These are all, again, from Anonymous 4's notes, partly. There are some significant changes. Look at the score. I'm just looking at the short example here on page 77, and I see 4 parts. The bottom part is the original first note. It's an F. If you look back at the original picture of the chant and you say, oh, that's a C clef, and you count down 5 lines and spaces, it's an F. It's the F below middle C. V, derunt homines, F. I'm not singing an F, but anyway, doesn't matter. No pitch standard. That is the first note that is printed as a whole note and lasts for the whole example that I have on page 77. F. It's this drone thing. You think, oh my gosh, that's just the first note. There's like 80 notes in this chant. How long did these church services take? The thing is that you didn't have to do a florid organum for the whole chant. You could do it for part of it, just like an illumination. We see these beautiful illuminations of text in medieval manuscripts, and the first letter is half the size of the page, and it's painted with things. Remember, the whole church service is still largely monophonic, so that people are chanting, "The Lord be with you, and also with you," it's a response, perhaps. And then there's even more basic reciting. This is the lesson from the 3rd chapter of John, beginning at the 12th verse. I'm just making it up. And then they would chant and occasionally change the note. But they would keep chanting until here endeth the reading. So there's all this sort of boring chant that is, remember, just like a microphone, it is the means of amplification, because there's no amplification. So if you have all this monophony, or close to monophony, then suddenly, at an emotional high point, a specific chant like this, that's from the propers, that said, all the shepherds were out in the fields and they saw. This is a Christmas Eve text. You see that important moment, and suddenly out of this monophonic texture comes this blossoming of polyphony, of discant organum. It would have been striking. And again, I can tell you, having sat and listened to it in Notre Dame, this Perotin, it's incredible. It fills the space and the echo, the reverb, you have no idea. All these nooks and crannies bouncing back, and it doesn't sound like just 4 parts, it sounds like 20,000 parts. It's divine. So we're looking at the bottom part and we say, oh gosh, that's just the first syllable of text. Okay. The other 3 parts above it, start going from the bottom up, the second line up, is the duplum, then the triplum, then the quadruplum. 4 parts. We're not writing in soprano, alto, tenor, bass here. This is not 18th century part writing. We're not even writing chords. 1, 4, 5, 1. How do I harmonize? This is pre-tonal. Tonal means we're keeping track of harmony by root motions of chords. This is modal, modality. We're keeping track of the pitches in relationship to the final F. We're keeping track of how they interact with each other horizontally, not with here's a chord, here's a chord, here's a chord, but oh, look at this little duet, oh, look at this little trio, or this duet, or it's a very horizontal exercise. Is this species counterpoint? No, not yet. Wait a little bit, we'll get there. Not soon, but we'll get there. So the upper voices, these florid 3 upper voices, have mostly in this example that long, short, long, short, long, that poetic rhythm that Anonymous 4 wrote about, said, hey, Leonin did this first, or we record Leonin doing it first. He probably wasn't the first one, I don't think at all. So we see this rhythm, and we're still keeping track of consonants, stepwise to dissonance, stepwise to consonance. But there are some other things added. For one thing, there are these little breaks in there. It goes da 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 da. That's for taking breaths. Ah, this was a sung style. Yeah, you need to take breaths. You'll hear, I think later on in this example, in the recording, you'll hear what's called a hocket, a hiccup, where we have da, 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 da. Take sort of, they alternate notes, different parts cover. I'll sing 1, you sing lay. I'll sing 2, you sing lay. I'll sing 3, you sing lay. I can't, I'm just here by myself, I can't do it. Maybe we'll do it in class or something. So that's hocket or hiccup. It becomes a kind of a fun, useful device that people use because we've got lots of notes here. We need to take breath. We also see in this example, even the first 3 bars that I see on page 77, we start to see not the same rhythm in every single part. For example, the third measure and bar lines, there were no bar lines. If you look back at the actual, here it is, here's the actual organum. It's on page 75. It's the far right example. You see all the many thousands of black dots there on the 3 upper lines? That's what you're looking at on page 77. And the first note is just like V. It's just there. So first 3 modern measures. I start to see by the third measure that the duplum, the second voice up from the bottom, has 8 notes. Da 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 da. The second voice from the top has da 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 da. And the top voice has da 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 da. They have different rhythms. This is a big deal. Big deal. Again, we don't know that people weren't doing this in secular instrumental music or whatever, but we have it written down now. It's planned out. And again, to coordinate things like breaths and phrase lengths, in this case, the quadruplum, I think this one was actually composed ahead of time. It would not have been improvised in this case, I don't think. I just don't think so. So this rhythmic complexity, it's starting to occur. I already said that page. We're almost done here. Yes. The governing rule that you could carry with you into the Renaissance. That's what happens when I spend 2 months in England. I can't say it the right way for here. The governing rule that we're going to carry forward into Renaissance, counterpoint, the 16th century, is that dissonance leads to consonance. Dissonance leads to consonance by step. The 8th notes here as written out in the quadruplum, tend to either be consonant or dissonant, and if they're dissonant, they're left by step. They're also approached by step. The long notes in the quadruplum, I don't think I spotted any dissonant long notes. They're consonant. Strong notes have to be consonant. That's going to come back in species counterpoint. Again, it still sounds a little funky to us because the 4th is considered consonant here. Now, if you look on page 77, because that's what I have in front of me right now, it's the third measure, the last measure. Look at the last 2 vertical sonorities. The last 2 vertical sonorities in the example on page 77. I'll try and put it up here, but I don't know. There's an F that's been happening forever on viderunt omnes. That's still happening. V. Notice they're all singing V, whatever part they're on. That's the text. There are no other words. They're just floridizing, elaborating that syllable. Look at the second to last sonority. Against the F, the drone F, which they didn't even bother to print it, we have a G, an E, and a D. I'm reading from the bottom up. G, E, D. Against F, the drone, that would have been a second, F to G, a 7th and a major 7th at that, super dissonant, F to E. And against the top voice, the quadruplum, F to D. You say, well, that's consonant, it's a 6th. Nope, remember, 6ths aren't consonant either. We have G, D, and E, the most dissonant cluster that you could have in the second to last moment of this section. So that when we resolve to the final vertical sonority here, it is full of consonants. To us, I'm looking at it vertically. How would Perotin have done it? He would have said, well, E is not a resting tone. It goes by step to the final F. Ti-do. G is not the resting tone. It goes by step to the final F. Re-do. D should move to its closest consonant thing with F. What's the other thing consonant if F is on the bottom? C. D has to move to C. Is this a clausula? Goose. Maybe duck. No, it isn't actually. Sorry, duck and goose. It's not a clausula yet. It's the prototype of a clausula. Is this a cadence? Duck? No, said goose. Not yet. We are not going 5-1. In fact, if you add up the notes, if I were in the key of F, the 5 chord would be C, E, G. I had G and E and D. There's no triad there. Don't tell me it's a 7th chord, because it isn't. We're not yet in tonal music. 5 to 1 is not happening here. We're not quite in 16th century counterpoint, so it's not a totally purely pristine clausula. But every possible dissonance is moving to every possible consonance. The universe has order. Kind of cool, huh? I think so too. I think I've said all the things I need to say about that. The next video, video 9, is going to be about some secular music. Not instrumental music yet, for those of you who are into instrumental music. Not that it doesn't exist, but we'll talk about that in the video. So you want to turn this off and study your notes. And don't forget as well that you have the little Quizlets to take for these different videos. So make sure you keep track of everything.